So climate change is back in the news, and not at all in the way Tony Abbott would have wanted. He has, of course, accused the Executive Director of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Christiana Figueres, of talking through her hat. Dr. Figueres' real crime, of course, was to point out that Tony Abbott's response to climate change was going to be hideously expensive and probably very ineffective, an extravagance that Australia can't afford. But Tony Abbott, glossing quietly over that, instead chose to concentrate on Dr. Figueres' line that climate change clearly played a role in last week's devastating bushfires in Australia. Note, played a role, was not the proximate cause, let alone the only cause, but climate change was changing the conditions around the world, and in particular it was making Australia hotter and drier, and therefore more susceptible to disastrous bushfires. Now, this is hardly a unique view. Just about every scientist with any pretensions to reality takes the same view. And in fact, the International Panel on Climate Change has suggested that the danger of bushfires in Australia will probably increase by up to 20% by 2020 and up to 100%, that's double, by 2050. So, what's Tony Abbott doing about it? Well, shooting the messenger, accusing her of talking through her hat. And of course, his reluctant Environment Minister Greg Hunt had to follow the script. Hunt was in London, was interviewed at some length by the BBC, and said that it was obvious Tony Abbott was right. There was no link between bushfires and climate change because he'd read that in Wikipedia. And he had. There it was in black and white. But unfortunately for Greg Hunt, he hadn't read Wikipedia quite as extensively as he might. If he'd looked under his own name, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, a comment pointed out that while Greg Hunt had all the expertise in Australia at his fingertips as a minister, all the best people, the best minds on climate change, he chose instead to rely on Wikipedia. Like, the comment ended, some total turd. And of course, that one has been expunged from the record. But even today, there's one up in Wikipedia under Greg Hunt's name, which mentions that Hunt in 2013 became Environment Minister and is doing a terrible job. No surprises there. So if we're going to rely on Wikipedia, you can pay your money and take your choice. I know which comment seems more likely to me. But still, I would rather rely on the science, as I think would most Australians. And if the bushfires do continue in Australia, if they get worse, they get more frequent, they come earlier in the season, all of which is happening even as we speak, then I think Tony Abbott is going to need rather more than his direct action plan, and Greg Hunt is certainly going to need rather more than Wikipedia. I'm Mungo McCallum.